welcome to another deep dive. This time we're going to be looking at blended learning in Singapore.
Ooh, Singapore.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So you know how everyone always says that blended learning is like,
New thing.
yeah, this brand new thing, like,
Cutting edge.
yeah, the future of education.
Right.
Well, we found this workshop from like
How long ago?
2011
Wow, okay.
from National Junior College in Singapore.
So over a decade ago, they were already thinking about this stuff.
Exactly. It's like this time capsule.
A time capsule.
Yeah, of what people were thinking about blended learning like back then.
I like that.
And you know what's so crazy is that when you read it, it's like they were dealing with
The same
issues that we're like dealing with today.
Yeah, which is really interesting because by looking at the past, we can kind of get a better picture of the present.
Totally. Like right away, they're talking about these challenges.
Okay.
Like, policy support,
Yeah.
like getting the government on board.
Right, of course.
And then teacher training, finding that sweet spot between online and offline activities.
Right.
And even like cultural shifts, like how people view education.
It's true. A lot of people are kind of stuck in the old ways of thinking about school.
Totally.
Yeah.
And, of course,
Oh, and the money.
always the money.
And the time.
Yeah.
That's like
the universal teacher complaint.
It is.
No time, no money.
But, okay, so get this. Despite all those challenges,
Okay.
the workshop talks about how Singaporean teachers were already using free tools.
Free? Really?
Yeah. Like Google Blogger and Facebook to like create engaging lessons.
Wow. That's,
Talk about resourcefulness.
yeah, it's really impressive, actually.
Right. And it's not even just about like making do.
Okay.
It shows how adaptable teachers are. Like they were willing to experiment with whatever they had.
It really challenges us to think about how we can use technology in creative ways, even when we don't have a lot of resources.
It really does, and it like busts this myth that you need all this fancy software and expensive subscriptions to do blended learning.
Totally.
It's about using what you have
Exactly.
and being creative.
So the workshop actually breaks down blended learning into 4 different models.
Okay, I like a good model.
Me too.
Lay it on me.
Okay, so there's supplemental, replacement, emporium,
Interesting.
and continuum.
Okay, so they each represent like a different level of online integration.
Exactly.
From like just adding a little tech to full-on virtual classrooms.
You got it.
Okay, cool.
So like supplemental, think of it as like dipping your toes into the blended learning pool.
All right, I like that analogy.
You're using tech to enhance your existing lessons.
So not a total overhaul just yet?
Right, like maybe you add some online quizzes or interactive activities to your lecture.
Makes sense.
And the workshop said that this model was a realistic starting point for Singapore back in 2011.
Yeah, they were really big on face-to-face learning.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that they'd start with something that complements that.
Right, but then they also present this other model, the emporium model.
Okay, what's that one about?
So this one's interesting.
Okay.
It's like they basically get rid of the traditional classroom altogether.
Whoa.
And instead, students go to this learning resource center and they access everything online and get personalized support from like tutors and stuff.
Wow. That's pretty radical.
Right. Especially for back then.
Yeah, it was 2011, remember?
Exactly.
Things were different then.
Yeah. And the workshop actually says that they didn't think Singapore would adopt the emporium model anytime soon.
It's interesting though, right? Because then we had this pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
And everyone was forced to go online.
Exactly.
Like schools all over the world had to figure out how to do virtual learning.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that changed their perspective at all.
It's a good question, right? Like, would they be more open to a model that prioritizes online learning now?
Yeah, maybe.
There's definitely something to think about.
It is.
Like how these big events can really shape the way we think about education.
Absolutely.
All right, so now we got to talk about the blended learning continuum.
All right, the continuum.
This is where it gets even more interesting.
Okay, all right.
So imagine a line.
Okay, got it.
On one end, you have fully face-to-face instruction.
Like the traditional classroom.
Exactly.
Okay.
And on the other end, you have fully online learning.
So like the emporium model.
Right. And in between, you have all these different points that represent different ways to blend those two.
So it's not just black and white. There's a whole spectrum of possibilities.
Exactly. And the workshop actually shows how different points on that continuum could apply to Singaporean classrooms.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. But here's the thing.
What's that?
Even though Singapore has like amazing internet.
I mean, everyone always talks about how technologically advanced they are.
Right.
So I'd imagine they have great internet.
They do. But the workshop authors still thought that fully online learning wasn't suitable for Singapore back in 2011.
Really? Why not?
They said it was because of the culture.
Oh, interesting.
Like, they really value in-person interaction.
That makes sense.
Yeah, they believe it's, like, crucial for learning. But that was over a decade ago.
Right.
So I wonder if their views have changed at all.
It's a good question.
Like, has technology blurred those lines between physical and virtual spaces enough to shift their thinking?
It's definitely something we should keep exploring.
Absolutely. All right, so for now, let's shift gears and talk about the actual tools they were using to do blended learning back then.
Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, let's see what they were working with back in 2011.
I'm curious to see how much things have changed.
Me too. All right, so we're back, and we've been talking all about how Singapore was approaching blended learning back in 2011.
Some really interesting insights, right?
Yeah, for sure. But now I kind of want to, like, fast forward.
Okay, to today.
Yeah, exactly. Like, have they actually followed through on those early ideas?
That's the big question, right?
It is. So one of the things they talked about was the need for government support,
Mm-hmm.
like actual policies and funding to make blended learning happen.
Yeah, you can't just talk about it. You got to put your money where your mouth is.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So have they done that?
Well, it seems like they have, actually.
All right.
Yeah, so in 2012, the Ministry of Education launched this initiative called Future Schools at Singapore.
Okay, what's that all about?
So it's basically a huge program to create these innovative learning environments.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole point is to like harness technology for personalized learning.
So they're actually putting resources behind this.
Yeah, it seems like they're serious about making this transformation happen.
That's good to hear. But what about the teachers?
Ah, yes, the teachers.
The workshop talked a lot about the need for teacher training.
Of course, you can't just throw technology at teachers and expect them to magically know how to use it.
Like, it's one thing to have the tools, but you got to know how to use them effectively.
Right, and Singapore seems to have recognized that.
Okay, so what are they doing?
So they've implemented these targeted training programs for teachers,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes beyond just like the technical stuff.
Yeah.
It's about helping them understand how to integrate technology into their teaching.
You know, that makes me think back to what we were talking about earlier about those Singaporean teachers using Blogger and Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it shows that they're already pretty resourceful and willing to experiment.
Right, they have that innovative spirit.
Exactly, and that's not something you can just teach in a training program.
It's a mindset,
Yeah, it's like a culture of creativity and adaptability.
and that might be one of the biggest lessons we can learn from Singapore.
What do you mean?
It's not just about having the latest gadgets or the fanciest platforms.
Okay,
It's about having teachers who are empowered to be creative and try new things.
so it's about fostering that mindset.
Exact.
I like that. So now I want to circle back to those models of blended learning.
Okay, the supplemental replacement, Emporium and Continuum.
Right. Do you think Singapore has kind of gravitated towards any of those in particular?
It's interesting because, they initially thought the Emporium model was like too radical for them,
Right.
but it seems like they haven't completely dismissed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so their Future Schools initiative actually incorporates some elements of the Emporium model.
Like what?
Like they have these dedicated learning labs,
Mm.
and they're encouraging more self-directed learning.
So they're keeping an open mind.
It seems like it.
Yeah, but is that enough? Like, have they actually addressed those deeper challenges that the workshop talked about?
That's a good question.
Like, what about those cultural preferences for in-person learning?
Right, and has the pandemic changed their thinking at all? I mean, those are all things that people are still debating.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that blended learning isn't like a static thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's constantly evolving.
Right. What might have been considered radical a few years ago might be totally normal now.
Exactly. And the pandemic definitely forced everyone to rethink things.
Totally. Like, we all had to adapt and figure out how to do things differently.
So yeah, I think those cultural preferences are probably still there. But the pandemic has definitely pushed the boundaries of what's possible.
For sure. And speaking of changing things, there's one thing that's like completely different now than it was back in 2011.
What's that?
Mobile learning.
Yes, the smartphones and tablets.
Right. Like, back then, the workshop was all about Blogger and Google sites.
Which were mostly accessed on computers.
Exactly. But now everyone has a mobile device.
So how has that changed things in Singapore?
Well, it's been a huge game changer.
Yeah, mobile devices open up so many possibilities for learning.
Right. Like, students can access information anytime, anywhere.
And Singapore has been really quick to embrace that.
Okay, what are they doing?
So they're promoting the use of mobile devices in schools.
Mm-hmm.
And they're developing all these apps and platforms specifically for mobile learning.
So it's like those early experiments with Blogger and Google Sites were kind of like the building blocks.
Yeah, like the foundation for what they're doing now.
Right. And it's crazy to think about how much technology has evolved.
It really has.
Like back in 2011, they probably couldn't even imagine what mobile learning would look like today.
It just shows you how fast things are changing.
It really does. But it's not just about delivering content through mobile devices.
Right.
It's also changed how students collaborate and communicate.
And how they're assessed.
Oh, yeah, assessment. That's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah, how do you measure learning when students are engaging with content in so many different ways?
Right. It's a good question.
So what's Singapore doing about that?
Well, they're kind of leading the way in terms of innovative assessment approaches.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So instead of just relying on traditional tests, they're using a more holistic approach.
Okay.
They're incorporating things like online quizzes, peer feedback, project-based assessments, even game-based assessments.
Wow, so they're really thinking outside the box.
They are. It's about moving beyond just memorizing facts.
Right.
It's about assessing skills and understanding.
And the ability to actually apply knowledge in real-world situations.
Exactly. And just as important,
Yeah.
they're shifting the focus from assessment of learning to assessment for learning.
What do you mean by that?
So instead of just using assessment to give students a grade, they're using it to help them learn and grow.
Okay, so it's like a tool for improvement.
Exactly.
That's a really important shift.
It is. All right, so I want to hear from some actual teachers now.
Okay, yeah, let's get some real-world perspectives.
Like, what are they saying about the impact of blended learning in their classrooms?
Well, I've come across some really inspiring stories from Singaporean teachers.
Oh, really? Like what?
So one teacher was talking about how she uses the SLS.
That online learning platform.
Yeah, that one. And she said she creates these personalized learning pathways for her students. And she's noticed a huge improvement in their engagement and motivation.
Especially for students who were struggling before.
That's amazing.
It is. It's like personalized learning can really make a difference.
It can.
And another teacher was saying how blended learning has helped her create a more inclusive classroom.
Oh, wow.
Where students with different learning needs can all succeed.
It's about giving them the support they need.
Right. And the flexibility to learn at their own pace.
That's so important.
It is. It's so inspiring to hear these stories.
It really is. It makes everything we've been talking about feel so much more real.
It does. It shows that blended learning can have a real impact on students' lives.
And that's what it's all about, right?
Absolutely. Welcome back to our deep dive. It's been really cool looking at how Singapore's been doing blended learning.
Yeah, definitely. And they've come a long way since those early days back in 2011.
Right. But so far, it's been kind of like big picture stuff, you know?
True.
So now I want to get into the nitty-gritty.
Okay, let's get specific.
Yeah. Like, what does this actually look like in the classroom?
I'm with you. Theory is great, but seeing it in action is where it gets really exciting.
Exactly. So let's start with the student learning space.
SLS.
Yeah, that's what they call it.
Okay, I've heard of that.
It's this national online learning platform.
Like their central hub for blended learning.
Exactly.
It's pretty impressive.
So tell me more, like, what is it?
Well, it's kind of like a massive online library.
Okay, but like way more interactive.
Right. Or way more dynamic. It's
Right.
not just about accessing resources. It's
Okay.
about creating a whole learning experience.
So what does that mean?
So teachers can use it to like create customized learning pathways for their students.
Oh, so it's personalized.
Exactly. They can tailor the content to each student's needs and learning style.
That's so cool.
Right. And it's not just for students. It
Oh.
also has professional development resources for teachers.
So it's like supporting the whole system.
Exactly. Keeping everyone up to date with the latest and greatest.
It's like this amazing ecosystem.
It really is.
Okay, so the SLS is the tech side of things, but Singapore is also really big on collaborative learning.
Oh, absolutely. Collaboration is key.
Right, and they're using blended learning to like supercharge that.
Okay, how so?
So they've got online discussion forums, collaborative document editing platforms, project-based learning activities.
So it's like blending online and offline collaboration.
Exactly. It's about taking the best of both worlds.
I love that, and it makes learning so much more engaging for students.
It does. Okay, so now for the big question.
Hit me.
Assessment.
Uh-oh. Yeah, that's a tricky one.
Oh, yeah, that's a tricky one.
It is like, how do you measure learning when students are learning in so many different ways?
Especially in a blended environment, right?
Right. Traditional tests don't really cut it anymore.
Not really.
But luckily, Singapore's been coming up with some really innovative assessment approaches.
Okay, I'm all ears.
So instead of just focusing on like rote memorization,
Mm-hmm.
they're using a more holistic approach.
Okay.
So they're doing things like online quizzes, peer feedback, project-based assessments, even game-based assessments.
Wow, that's quite a mix.
It's about assessing skills and understanding not just facts.
And making sure students can actually apply what they've learned.
Exactly. And another really important shift.
Yeah.
They're moving away from assessment of learning
Okay.
and towards assessment for learning.
So it's not about just giving a grade.
Right. It's about using assessment to help students learn and grow. That's a powerful shift.
It is. All right, so I want to hear what the teachers have to say about all this.
Okay, yeah, let's get some firsthand perspectives.
Like, have they actually seen blended learning make a difference in their classrooms?
Well, from what I've seen, the answer is a resounding yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there are so many Singaporean teachers who are like singing the praises of blended learning.
Give me an example.
So one teacher was talking about how she uses the SLS to personalize learning for her students.
Mm-hmm.
And she said she's seen a huge improvement in their engagement and motivation.
Especially for those who were struggling before.
Exactly. It's like giving them the tools they need to succeed.
I love that. And what about inclusion?
Oh, yeah. There was another teacher who was saying how blended learning has helped her create a more inclusive classroom where students with different learning needs can all thrive.
Because they can get the support they need.
Right. And they can learn at their own pace.
It's so amazing to hear these stories.
It really is. It makes it all feel so much more real and tangible.
It does. It shows that blended learning is more than just a theory.
It's a powerful tool that can transform education.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into blended learning in Singapore, what are some key takeaways?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that blended learning is about so much more than just the technology.
Okay.
It's about using technology thoughtfully and strategically.
To enhance teaching and learning.
Exactly. It's about creating more personalized, engaging, and effective learning experiences.
And it's about empowering teachers, engaging students, and fostering a love of learning.
Well said.
And Singapore's journey has shown us that it's possible.
It has. It's a really inspiring example.
It is. So for anyone listening who's thinking about trying blended learning,
Don't be afraid to jump in.
yeah, start small, experiment, learn from others.
There are so many resources out there to help you.
Exactly. And remember,
What's that?
blended learning is a journey,
It is.
and it's a journey worth taking.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for joining us on our deep dive into blended learning in Singapore.
It's been a pleasure.